and I found out my husband has been telling his coworkers that I'm his sister. What do I do? Please help. My husband, I'll call him Josh, and I have been together for 6 years, married for 4, and we don't have kids. We have a really healthy and communicative relationship. We're both pretty easygoing, and I really love him. He started working at a large accounting firm about 3 years ago, and from what he tells me, he loves it there. He's made a lot of friends through his job, and he goes out with them for drinks and social events quite often, and I've been totally okay with that. I'm quite introverted, so I've never been interested in meeting his colleagues or work friends, nor have I asked to. I've got my own circle of friends, and I'm fine with us having separate friend groups. After what happened yesterday, it only just occurred to me that he has never actually asked me if I'd like to meet any of them or go to one of his work events. I guess that's important context. Anyway, I'll start with what happened a few months ago that I had brushed off until now. I was at a bar with some friends for a couple of Friday after-work drinks, and a guy approached me. He was there with some friends too. He looked slightly familiar, but I hadn't met him before. He seemed friendly enough, and he asked me, my name, right? I think I must have just given him a confused look because he followed up with, I'm Jake, I work with Josh. I realized that I recognized him from some photos on my husband's phone. This is where it gets a bit embarrassing. I'm a bit socially awkward, and so I struggled to end the conversation. But he just kept talking at me. I guess he was already a couple of beers deep. But while he was talking, he said something like, it's great that you guys are still so close. I haven't talked to my brother in ages. At the time, I was like, huh? But I just assumed he was drunk and not making sense, so I ignored it. He started to get a little flirty, so I turned to my friends and we left shortly after that. I didn't say anything to them about it, and it didn't seem like a big deal to me. I also decided not to tell my husband that I had met his coworker Jake. Not to hide it, but because I figured the guy wouldn't even remember talking to me, and I didn't want to make it awkward for Josh at work by telling him his colleague tried to hit on me. I just thought, no harm, no foul. But yesterday morning, I was out walking our dog, Monty. He's a cross between a few breeds and has very unique markings. This matters, I promise, and was on my way to my regular cafe, which is in town. I was waiting in line to order, and the guy in front was an older man. He got his coffee and turned around, but stopped and looked at my dog and goes, "Hello, Monty!" Monty was super excited to see him, apparently, and so I guessed that the guy was another colleague of Josh's, because Josh brings the dog to the office a couple of times a week. I thought it was sweet, to be honest, so I smiled at him and said hi. He introduced himself. I guessed correctly that he was a colleague. But then he said something like, "Aren't you a good sister?" walking his dog for him. I was so confused that I didn't even know how to react at first, so I stumbled on my words and just said, "It's my dog." I regret it, but I genuinely couldn't bring myself to correct him and say that I'm Josh's wife and not his sister. It was just too awkward, and I just wanted to leave because I think was suddenly dawning on me what might have been going on. He asked me something about sharing a dog, but I was able to escape the conversation by being next in line to order my coffee, and he left. I seriously don't know what to do, because what the frick? Do I even ask my husband about this? Part of me is just assuming or hoping that it's a mistake, that he doesn't talk about me much at work and they assume we are related because we both have brown hair. But the thought that he has been telling his coworkers that I'm his sister, and evidently they have seen what I look like, so they must have seen photos, makes my stomach churn. I don't even know how I would broach the subject with him. I need some help. What would you guys do in this situation? I have only told one friend what happened because it's so weird and embarrassing, and she has jumped straight to time to plot his downfall because she's my ride or die. Love her. But I don't want to immediately assume the worst or ruin my marriage over something that could be nothing. I'm sorry for the long and rambly post, but I would really appreciate any and all advice. Now for a small update. Josh came home at about 2:30 a.m. last night, but he was drunk, so he just went straight to sleep, which is fine by me because frick having this conversation in that state. I've just woken up, but he's still sleeping. First thing I just want to clear up. I've seen a lot of people suggesting I have crippling social anxiety or am severely introverted, which I suppose you could glean from the way I explained what happened, but I'm not. I meant that I'm slightly introverted in that I'm not the most eager to meet lots of new people at once, especially a bunch of finance bros whose weekends consist of unending sports bar beers, where I assume I would be mansplained everything until my ears bleed. Prob a negative assumption, but I'm sure some of you know what I mean. I suppose you could say that I'm confrontation averse in that I'm quite laid back and prefer to keep a conversation easy and positive. I don't like it when things are awkward and correcting when people misrecognize me as one of those things. But I'm not terrified of confrontation. Also, my husband and I do share some mutual friends. I didn't explain that well, but our lives are not entirely separate. The way he acts towards me around our mutual friends is extremely affectionate and normal. It is only his work friends that I have never interacted with. I've also seen some people suggest that what is going on is equivalent to my husband beating me and me hopelessly wondering whether I should break up with him. Or that I'm stupid for thinking my relationship was healthy when it clearly isn't. Like, damn, cut me some slack. I'm a real person, and this is an entirely alien and bizarre situation for me. My first reaction wasn't to assume the worst, but I do appreciate that you all have made me certain that it is a big deal. I guess I needed confirmation that the things that happened are enough proof that Josh has been purposefully lying, and they weren't just mix-ups. I'm going to talk to him today and ask him directly why he's telling his coworkers that I'm his sister. I followed the advice of writing my points down so that they don't get lost if I get emotional. Lol. I will do my best not to let him slither out of it, and I hope he has some proof that his colleagues know I'm his wife. I know that's not the theatrical confrontation you guys were hoping for, but it's a Saturday and I can't wait. Wish me luck. Thank you all. I didn't go into much detail about our relationship because it didn't seem relevant, but I meant it when I say we've had the healthiest and best relationship I've ever been in. I was friends with him for a year and a bit before we started dating. We met at uni. I've had shitty relationships before, and he truly blew me away when we started dating. He is genuinely the most empathetic, kind, intelligent man I have ever met. He remembers every little thing about me. He's so lovely to me every day and does little acts of service just to make my day better. And I would do anything for him. We are both really supportive of each other. We also have a great intimacy life, and we are intimate frequently, so I know he's not starved of it or anything. But that's why it's so hard for me to assume the worst, because literally, just earlier tonight before he went out, he made me dinner and told me he loved me like he always does. Like it just doesn't seem possible or real for him to be living some double life, you know? I can't even imagine it. As I'm typing, it feels like I'm in a dream or talking about someone else. Now for a few comments. Does he not wear a wedding ring to work? Why does he need to hide the fact he's married? Sorry, but this would send me into a tailspin. Find out as much as you can before confronting him. This is where I am right now, tailspinning. Reading these comments and starting to think I'm stupid because it seems so obvious from an outside perspective. But I know him so well, I'm just finding it so hard to fathom he would even do something like this. I think you are underreacting here. There is literally no good reason he has told all his coworkers you are his sister. I am so sorry. You could choose to ask him why, or you could just leave. You're right. I think I was still in denial and hoping it was all a mix-up when I posted this. I still am a little. My husband is out right now and I'm in bed and my head is spinning, but I think I'll talk to him tomorrow. OOP could surprise her husband at his job to give a kiss in front of his colleagues. I really, really wish I was the kind of person that could do this. But the thought of having everyone looking and judging and laughing is just too much for me to handle. I don't even know them, and the thought is making me dizzy. But I think meeting him at work could be a good idea, just to see how he reacts. I just don't know if I can wait the whole weekend without talking to him about this. So he's either having an affair at work or keeping his options open. Neither good. I'm starting to think you're right, but I still can't even wrap my head around that being possible. He's been just as present and loving as he always has. Nothing has changed. Now for the 1-month update. Hi everyone. I just wanted to say thank you for the overwhelming amount of support and advice. I'm blown away, and it really means a lot and has kept me grounded. I'm sorry for the slow update. I know a lot of you were interested in what happened. I'll just get right into it. On Saturday morning, I woke up earlier than my husband. He was very hungover, so he was like sleeping a rock. But you guys will be proud of me because I followed some advice and decided to look through his phone properly while he was sleeping. I have been on his phone so often just pissing around on it that I had never thought to check anything very deeply. I know his passcode by heart. I checked all the expected things like Instagram DMs, Facebook Messenger, his iMessages, etc., and I didn't find anything that set off alarm bells to me. But I know from some comments that people who are cheating are good at covering their tracks and hiding messages, so I kept looking around. I saw he had a folder called Work, and so I looked in there, and he had a couple of Microsoft apps, Outlook, Authenticator, OneNote, etc., but he also had MS Teams. So I opened that up and had a look around. It did feel like I might have been breaking laws looking at his work messages, but I obviously had to. Anyway, I was already upset to see that he had a bunch of one-on-one chats with several female coworkers, which at first glance is obviously not an issue because everyone works with people of the opposite gender and are required to communicate with them. But a couple of them were vaguely flirty. Nothing I would call egregious, but there would be the occasional message between them with some playful innuendo or a wink emoji. These upset me, obviously, and they did send me into a bit of a spiral. But I didn't find anything that suggested he was having an out-and-out affair with any of them. Still, I followed someone's suggestion of screenshotting the messages and I airdropped them to myself. I still wanted some evidence of the lie, though. Some proof of Josh telling someone that I was his sister directly. A commenter suggested that I go through his messages and search for keyword sister. I wanted to reply to your comment and say thank you for the idea, but the post was locked, so I couldn't, but thank you. So I searched for sis on his MS Teams, hoping to find results for both sister and sis. A bunch of messages from all hands group chats or one-on-one chats came up from other people, all unrelated and about their own sisters or whatever. But my heart dropped out my butt, lol, when I saw there was a direct message from Jake, the guy from the bar, to Josh from a Monday a few months ago. Jake's messages said, "Ran into your sis at the bar on Fry. She's single, right?" And my husband had the gall to reply, "Nah, she's married." I literally almost burst into flames on the spot when I saw that. I can't even describe how much I was shaking after reading those messages. Firstly, that I could have confronted Josh about this months ago. I was and still am so furious with myself for that. Josh would have been praying I didn't remember meeting Jake or that I wouldn't mention it, and he would have been counting his lucky stars that I never did. He probably thought he was hot shoot for getting away with that, and I nearly burnt a hole through the floor thinking about it. But secondly, I was just in shock that he had the balls to tell this guy that I'm the one who is married because he doesn't want anyone having it on with me. But he is allowed to coyly flirt with every woman in the office? Anyway, I kept going back through the search results on his MS Teams, and eventually I got as far back as 2-ish years ago. And I did in fact find a message from Josh himself to a group chat. It said, "Me and sis in Nusa Dua." I clicked on that and saw that he had sent it alongside a bunch of photos of him and I from our holiday to Bali. We went to Bali for our 2nd anniversary. I thought he probably chose those photos because he's shirtless and had been working out, so he looked hot in all of them. I was in tears seeing all of this, obviously. I took screenshots of those too and airdropped all of the screenshots to myself. Needless to say, I was devastated, and still am, to see all of that. I am still struggling to even process it at all. But that all happened on Saturday morning, and I immediately took myself to my friend's house. I'll call her Sophie. I went to her place to cry it out and show her what I found, and she was extremely supportive and probably more furious than me. Lol. At around 1:30 p.m., I got a phone call from Josh, and I hung it up immediately. He sent me a few messages along the lines of, "Where are you, baby? I'm ordering food. Want some? Sad to not wake up next to you this morning." Guys, I have to reiterate how much I loved this man and how heart-wrenching it was to see him still acting like nothing had gone wrong. It took so much willpower to not just pretend none of it had ever happened and go home to him. I know a lot of you will yell at me or accuse me of being terrified of confronting him about this, which is not true. Please have some empathy. It takes me time to process my emotions, and I wouldn't have even been able to form a sentence if I tried to confront him immediately after seeing those messages. I needed some time away with Sophie to recollect myself, and so I stayed the night at her place. She ordered us Chinese, and she helped me plan how I would confront him. I got a bunch more texts and calls from him as the evening progressed, and I eventually put my phone on Do Not Disturb. Sunday morning, I woke up feeling more angry than sad, so I opened my phone and finally replied to his messages. "Coming home now, need to talk." I kept it cryptic to make him squirm, to be honest. Because I am fraught with emotions, I can't remember the entire conversation word for word, but I'll try to replay it as best I can. Long story short, I got home and he tried to hug me, but I refused him and we just stood in the kitchen. I did confront him like someone suggested. I just said, "Why have you been telling your coworkers I'm your sister?" I wish it would have been like a movie scene where the color drained from his face, or he immediately looked like a deer in headlights, but he didn't. It was like he had been girding himself for this confrontation for a while, because he just frowned at me and looked flabbergasted. He just said, "Huh?" This made me so angry. How are you going to pretend to be stupid after 3 years of lying? I basically said, "Don't play dumb. 2 of your coworkers have greeted me as your sister, and I have proof of you telling them. And I know you're pretending to be single." Essentially, I asked him what he had to say for himself. He still played stupid. He became moderately defensive and just kept saying, "I don't know what you're talking about," or "Why would I lie about you?" I cannot describe how furious I was at this point, but I was in tears. I always cry when I'm angry, so he was trying to comfort me as if I was having some kind of irrational breakdown. I showed him the screenshot of his message saying, "Me and sis," and I said something like, "You tell me." He just said, "I don't know what I'm looking at, and I'm confused." I got so angry that I left again and went back to Sophie's because it felt like a dead-end road. I didn't think I was going to get him to admit to anything, and I was just getting so furious I couldn't continue. He was really upset and in tears, which to me was evidence that he knew he was lying and that he was going to have to come up with some explanation. He tried to get me to stay, but I told him that until you have something to say for yourself, we've got nothing to talk about. At like 8:30-ish, he called me again, and I did pick up. He basically asked for us to talk, and he said he has some things to say. So I went back to our apartment. He had written out a bunch of stuff on a piece of paper as if he had prepared a speech and sat me down on the couch. He asked me not to say anything while he was explaining himself. I'll write down the gist of what he said in bullet points. He started by apologizing relentlessly and admitting that he pretended to be stupid before because he couldn't immediately think of something to say for himself. He said that immediately after he started at his job, he realized the atmosphere was like a frat house. All of his team members were men in their 20s and 30s that were single and fuckboys, his word. He noticed that the one guy in their team that was married would either get picked on or essentially excluded from any and all social interactions. That included getting lunch, inside jokes, going out on Friday, etc. These guys were friendly and welcoming to Josh, and he admitted that he was desperate to fit in with them. He hated feeling like fresh meat. So he was scared that saying he was married would alienate him from his coworkers, and at first just never mentioned that he was married. He said he did wear his wedding ring and that they had just never pointed it out. A few months in, they were all out drinking after work. He admitted that after one of his workmates saw a picture of him and I on his lock screen, they asked him who I was, and in a moment of panic, he said, "My sister." He was really apologetic at this point, and he was crying a lot. He couldn't even look at me, and he was just reading what he had written down. Anyway, he said that from then, he basically dug himself a deeper and deeper grave because they kept grilling him about me and wanting to see more pictures of me. He said he had let it go on too long and that he didn't have the balls to admit to the lie. They would always bring me up and ask stuff like, "Did you give her my number yet?" Or joke that they had slept with me, etc. So when he got that message from Jake, he essentially thought it was just him taking the piss. But he didn't like the jokes they were making about me and said that I was married in hopes they would stop. They didn't. He said that this wasn't the first time he told them I was married. In fact, he had said so pretty much immediately after saying I was his sister. He said that those pictures of us in Nusa Dua were the only pictures that he had purposefully sent them and deliberately lied about after what he called an endless barrage of pestering from his colleagues to share the pics from his holiday. He said he was really ashamed that he did that. He told me that he had never had an affair or even considered it, that the messages between him and his female colleagues were banter, and that it was commonplace to talk to people like that in the office. He also said he knows how disgusting it is and he is embarrassed to have been acting like a fuckboy. Again, his word. He concluded his speech by apologizing again and said that he was disgusted with himself and ashamed that he had lied for so long, but felt like he had trapped himself and that he couldn't find a way to get himself out of it. He said he knows he could have confessed the truth to either his coworkers or to me at any point, but that he didn't because he was a coward. He said that he'll confess to his entire office that he lied and that I am his wife and not his sister if I want him to. He said that he will quit his job without a word if it would make me feel better and that he hopes I can forgive him, but he understands if I can't. Anyway, I couldn't really think of anything to say at that point. He went to lock himself in the bathroom, and I just sat on the couch crying. I still don't know if I can trust what he said, and a lie that extreme is just baffling to me. If he can lie like that for so long, what else could he be lying about? But his explanation and apologies seemed so sincere and genuine, and I guess to an extent what he said is believable. He has always been extroverted, but very susceptible to peer pressure, especially from other blokes. If nothing else, to me, it's a sign of shocking immaturity. Anyway, I packed up a bag and went back to Sophie's, and I'm still at her place as I'm writing this. She said I can stay as long as I need to. I told Josh that I needed time away from him to think about everything and whether or not I believe him or whether I can ever trust him again. He told me to take as long as I needed and that he will still be there if or when I get back, he said, even if it takes a year. Right now, nothing feels real. I'm still dealing with the emotional whiplash from all of this, and I can't keep food down or think about anything. I've taken the day off work, and Josh told me he's going to take off the whole week. Sophie and my other friends have told me not to make a decision on anything until my head is clear. I spoke to my parents this morning, and my mom says it's just a bump in the road. But she and my dad adore Josh, so they're pretty biased, lol. That's where I am right now. I'll take some time before I consider my next steps. I can't say whether I'm leaning towards forgiveness or divorce, but those are really the only options. I kind of feel lost in a void at the moment. That's probably the best way to describe it, just emptiness. Thanks again for all of your advice and support. I'm truly so grateful, and having this place to write down all of my thoughts has been helpful to get my mind a little clearer. This will be my last update, unless I make an edit to clear things up. All the best. Now for a few comments. When asked if her husband wears his wedding ring when he is out with his colleagues, and if they notice anything different about her husband, she said, he said he hasn't taken his ring off and that people had pointed it out before, but he just managed to weasel his way out of explaining it. But he said people almost never noticed. I struggled to believe that, but IDK, thank you. Another commenter said, that's how I feel too. From what he said, it sounded like it went unacknowledged because he never tried anything on with other women. But that's giving him a lot of grace. More grace than I'm willing to give him right now anyway. Then another commenter, 9mm Girl, added, having worked in the finance industry for years, 43F, there is definitely a more cliquey vibe than in some other industries. Being single and partying hard off hours is expected as you're coming up the ranks, and you definitely get picked on, singled out, and/or passed over in favor of yes men, company men if you don't comply. That being said, your husband has no backbone. It takes an individual with a strong sense of self to march to the beat of their own drum when everyone else is doing something different. His inability to even admit that he was in a committed relationship is likely foreshadowing how he will be when times get tough. And they will get tough if you stay together. My recommendation is that he attends therapy on his own and you attend couples counseling together with a different therapist, but only if you want to do so. Then OP replied, "This is really helpful to know. Thank you. I don't work in finance. I work for a small creative company, so I have no clue about workplace culture in other industries. But yeah, I am pretty horrified that he was that weak-willed under the pressure of random men. If I can ever bring myself to forgive him, I would definitely force him to attend counseling. I knew he was easily peer pressured, but not to this extent." Finally, another commenter, Pleasant Ad 4784, said, "I'm so sorry you're going through this." What an absolute gut punch. When I read your first post, I was thinking there was a very good chance he didn't want to tell anyone he was married for this exact reason. It seems that fitting in and being liked by a bunch of frat bros was more important to him than honoring your marriage. Why does he care so much about going out and getting drunk with these dipshits? Shouldn't he be moving past that mentality? I suggest marriage counseling. He needs to figure out what drove him to live this lie for 3 years. And I'm curious, how often does he come home as drunk as he did? Then OP responded, he would often go for after-work drinks on Fridays. That's pretty standard where we live, so do I. But I should say that he doesn't regularly go out that late or get that drunk. Last Friday, it was a special occasion because it was his friend's birthday. But this friend wasn't one of his work friends. I knew the guys he was out with. Am I the idiot for kicking my husband out after finding out he might have a child with my dead best friend? My 33F, husband 36M, may have cheated on me with my dead best friend and had an affair baby. I don't even know where to start. The past 6 months have been an absolute clusterfuck, and it only seems to be getting worse. My best friend since elementary school, who I'll call Alice, passed away in February from cancer. She had a 2-year-old daughter who went into the custody of her mom after she passed away, who I'll call Alexis. Last month, Alexis showed up on our doorstep unannounced, telling my husband he needs to take responsibility for his child and either take custody or start finally paying child support. She says that Alice had told her when her daughter was born who the father was, but didn't want anything to do with him. To answer the inevitable, Alice was a traveling nurse and made a lot of money, which is the only reason I can think of for why she didn't go for child support. During this conversation, my husband had the worst panic attack he's ever had, so we had to end the conversation before I could get more details. My husband's story is, I don't even know. He said that Alice's daughter is probably his, but that it isn't what I think. Almost 3 years ago, we threw a large housewarming party as we just moved into our dream home after I finally finished residency and was set to make real money for once. Alice was in town and set to be at the party, but I was called into work before she got there. I didn't get back till after 3 a.m. Party was winding down, my husband was passed out upstairs, and Alice had already left the party, which at the time I did find strange, as we hadn't seen each other in months. My husband claims he woke up in the middle of the night to Alice on top of him, but he passed out again before he could say anything. He claims he never told me because he was worried I wouldn't believe him, which I don't know if I do. He showed me some texts he sent his best friend the next day, asking for his advice about him thinking someone rapped him. But if he cheated, he could have had that conversation as evidence, especially since he never said Alice specifically. Ever since the party, he has been very distant with Alice, and after she had her daughter, He would even find excuses not to be around the house when she would visit at all. I don't know if that's because he cheated or if Alice did actually rap him and this was his trauma response. Honestly, I don't know what to do. I've known Alice since we were children, and she had never come across as that kind of person. But I've also known my husband for over a decade, and he's not once ever given the inclination of a cheater. He's an attractive guy, and I've seen the looks he gets at the gym, and he's never even given more than a glance. What the hell should I do? How do I figure out what the truth is here when Alice isn't even around to defend herself? She never even implied she liked my husband, let alone want to sleep with him. I told my husband he needs to get a DNA test before anything is decided on the child's part, but in the meantime, he needs to move out while I think about what I'm going to do here. Now for a few important comments. When asked about Alice's behaviors when visiting her at home, and if Alice would tell her about the affair, OP said, "Not that I noticed." She'd always been at least a little standoffish towards him, as she thought I could do better. The first time she visited after she gave birth, she asked where he was since he wasn't home for the first time, but she never asked again after that. I hadn't thought about that actually, thank you. That's a good point. She always thought I could do better than him, so if it was an affair, you'd think she would have told me on her deathbed at least. When asked if her husband drinks or not, OP said, "Not at all. He rarely drinks, and generally only at parties, which at our ages are few and far between. He works a tough and stressful job, so I figured once he was buzzed, he laid down and fell asleep, not that he had drunk more than normal or anything like that." When asked if Alice ever named the father of her baby, OP said, "She told me it was a man she met while in another state for work. Short-term fling." Then another commenter said, "Wait, I get that you need to process all this, but you've told the potential victim of intimacy attack that he needs to leave his home, his safe place, and you, his safe person. I think you've jumped the gun a bit here and shunned your life mate who may have been raped." OP replied, "Yes, I'm starting to realize I've made a terrible mistake." Now for the same day update. After talking with you, I've come to the realization that my husband is being truthful. My best friend rapped him. Several people pointed out that with Alice not liking my husband, if it was an affair, she would have told me when she was dying, if only to separate us. You're absolutely right. I was there, in the room while she passed. I held her hands for days. We talked about so much. If it was just an affair, she would have told me. But if she rapped my husband, she wouldn't have said a word. And that's the type of thing horrible people take to the grave. I've also come to the realization that I made a terrible mistake asking my husband to leave for a few days while I gather my thoughts. Not to make excuses, but losing my best friend to cancer, a long cancer fight at that, was brutal. To say that I was devastated wouldn't do it justice. That it happened only 6 months ago, I'm still feeling it every day. So to have this thrown on me, it's like I'm losing her all over again. Either she betrayed me and fricked my husband, or she betrayed me and rapped my husband. Not only have I lost her, but now I've lost the good memories, an entire lifetime's worth. It was impossible for me to look at him and not also see her and be struck with the horror and realization of that loss all over again. I felt I needed to be able to break down, grieve, and think without the fresh wave of loss I got every time I saw him. It was wrong of me to ask him to leave. You're right, though, and as of a few minutes ago, I've righted this wrong. I called my husband, I apologized, told him I believe him, and begged him to come home. He'll be here in half an hour at most, and I'm going to support my husband the way I know he would have supported me. I've been an off-and-on Reddit user for several years, and sometimes the advice given on subreddits like these can be a bit hit or miss. But today, you guys did good. You've helped me realize not only that I was wrong and being stupid at that, but that I was hurting the person that needed me the most. I was selfish. I have no idea what we're going to do as far as the potential daughter is concerned, but I can assure you we'll deal with it together. It's going to take a lot of time and probably a lot of therapy to grieve this new loss. I feel numb now, as though I'll never cry again. My best friend rapped my husband, which means she was no friend of mine. She flaunted it, coming to my house, sitting with me, and gabbing. She brought her child here, trying to rub it in his face, right in front of me. She tortured the man I loved, and I was an unknowing party to it. I feel sick to my stomach over how many times she came over just to hold it over him. I'm honestly at a loss on how to make that up to him. If you all have any ideas, please feel free to give them to me. I think I'll need all the help I can get. Tomorrow, I'm going to take a leave of absence from work, just until we can figure out our next steps and we can get our heads on straight. Thank you, everyone. Am I the idiot for dumping my freeloader boyfriend and selling our house to pay off my debts? I've been with my boyfriend for almost 10 years. I own the house we live in. Due to unemployment, he stopped contributing to the bills over 5 years ago. For the past 3 years, he's been back to work. He paid off all his debt, and his only bills are his car insurance and our cell phone bill. I've asked him a dozen times to start contributing, and it always turns into a fight. He tells me if I need money, I should just ask for it, but I don't believe that's a good substitute for giving me a specific amount I can rely on every month for the bills. I also do 95% of the grocery/household shopping. I've made bad decisions and buried myself in debt, trying to live a lifestyle that I should be able to afford if I wasn't supporting him. He wants to buy a boat. I'm about to take a $9 per year pay cut at work. He knows how much debt I have, decided I'm breaking up with him, selling the house to pay my bills, and walking away happy with probably $100 in my pocket. Literally life-changing money. Am I overreacting by ending a 10-year committed relationship without talking to him about it one more time and giving him a chance to make it right? To answer some of the more common questions, I already rent out a room to someone. I didn't mention it because it didn't seem relevant. I've raised his rent starting next month. He's also had a really sweet deal for a few years. I have a very good job. I work for USPS. Problem is, USPS is going broke, and they've realized they can pay a part-timer $20 an hour to do what they pay me almost $40. I don't know how bad it'll be yet, but it's looking like a $11K per year cut. I'm trying to get ahead of it before it hits. The benefits are great, and I don't have a degree, so there's no real way for me to get into a higher-paying job. I am considering Instacart/DoorDash once it does hit. Just doesn't seem fair that I have to work 2 jobs while he sat on his butt for 2 years. And listen, I get it. Selling is a bad idea. A house is an investment. But I don't really see any other way of getting out from under this debt. I don't want the hassle of trying to rent the whole thing out to someone and pay for an apartment myself. I don't want to have to maintain it. It's way too big for me. And I don't even think I want to stay in this state. Sell now, pay off debt, put money away and earn interest on it. Then in a year or so, once I've got my head straight, hopefully move somewhere warmer. One more thing. He already has a boat. A cheap boat, if there is such a thing. He wants a nice new boat, so he doesn't have to keep putting money into the one he's got. Now for a few important comments. When asked about her budget for the house and paying off the debt she has, OP said, yeah, pretty much. I could afford it if I didn't have $1,000 a month in credit card payments, and if I wasn't about to take a nearly $1,000 a month pay cut. I also have no interest in living in a place this big or maintaining my yard by myself, and it would take years for a roommate to reach the same financial benefit as just selling. It would take about 5 years for rent to pay my debt, and that's at the amount it's at right now, not counting all the interest charges that would happen over those 5 years. I can't. I ran the numbers. I can't afford my bills and the mortgage. Even taking on a roommate would still take 5+ years to pay it off, and I don't want to live with anyone for a long time. On making a safe retirement account to live comfortably after moving out and taking care of what she owes, OOP said, I have a retirement account and I can afford rent on my salary with no credit card bills. I'm planning to increase my retirement contribution to pretty much the maximum and slowly chip away at the $100K while it also sits in a savings account earning interest. On getting in therapy to deal with her issues and taking care of herself first before anyone else, OOP said, I was in therapy. My therapist is moving to a new practice that doesn't accept my insurance, so I have to find a new one. I have gently encouraged him to seek therapy for a long time, but he won't. I've suggested couples therapy multiple times, but he believes that's a sign the relationship is already over. So basically, I'm just giving him what he must expect at this point. She's out of state, and her new practice only takes clients from a specific EAP that my company doesn't participate in. I really wish staying with her was an option. Working on it. Had some undiagnosed mental health issues, which explain literally every dumb thing I've done. I'm actively working on myself. When asked if she has kids with her boyfriend and if it would put more debt on her, Oe said, "He already has one, grown up, and I don't want any, thank God." Oe explains the budget she and her boyfriend spend every week. I spend about twice as much on his groceries as I do for mine. I eat one meal a day and about $12 a week on snacks. He eats lunch and dinner and probably $20 a week snacks. He drinks $30 of Diet Coke every week. I drink a $4 pack of bottled water with Mio or Crystal Light packets and the occasional energy drink. I have a decent car because I got sick of used ones being unreliable. My car payment isn't extravagant and it's good on gas. I do take 2 to 3 vacations per year, 2 long weekends, and a 5-ish day one. I shop around for the best deals and pay cash for everything except the hotel and flight points. I always suggest camping, but he likes to be more comfortable. Anyways, lost track of what point I was making here. I fully admit I've made bad financial decisions, but those decisions wouldn't have been nearly as bad if he was carrying his own weight. I guess I figured he'd step up eventually, and he just hasn't. When asked about her boyfriend's work situation, OOP said, "No, he was only unemployed for 2-ish. But he hasn't paid a consistent or helpful amount of money for our household in over 5. Now for the 4-month update, my original post blew up way bigger than I ever expected. I was definitely overwhelmed by all of your responses, and I truly appreciate how many people care about a random internet stranger. I've considered posting an update many times since, but wanted to wait until it all played out, but I've had people reaching out recently, so I decided this was a good time. I spent a decent amount of time setting things up for myself behind the scenes. I had a safety plan for myself and my cats in case he got angry. I spent a long time putting a plan together for what I would do after selling my house. I broke up with him in early June. It was one of the most emotionally difficult things I've ever done. We talked for hours over multiple days about what went wrong. He didn't get angry, just sad. I was really sad too, and I still am. But we're both on the same page now, and we agree that it's the best thing for both of us. He moved out right away and has been slowly moving his stuff out. It took me about 2 months to get my house ready for sale, but once it was listed, I accepted a very good offer within a week. Closing is 3 weeks from now. I decided to take this opportunity to completely change my life. I'm moving across the country. I already have a place and a job lined up, and I'm really excited for my future. I'm making about as much money as I expected, paying off all my debt and investing a large amount of what's left. I'm moving to a lower cost of living area, and my expenses will be considerably less than they have been. And the job I have lined up will pay about the same as I make now, so I'll be in really good shape. I've already signed a lease for a suite apartment. Maybe I'll look into buying again in the future, but for now, I'm just looking forward to a fresh start and the opportunity to make my life exactly what I want it to be. Now for a few important comments. Did he ever say why he wanted to buy a $40,000 boat instead of helping you pay off your debt? Sort of. He just wasn't thinking, I guess. Somehow he always thought I was fine, even though he knew how much debt I was in, and even though I begged him so many times to start contributing consistently. In his mind, I must have been fine because I never asked him for specific amounts to cover specific bills. Oh, I love this ending. I hope you're moving to a cool city and make lots of friends. Very cool city where I already have a couple good friends, and I can't wait to meet more.